Yep, we're ready. This is the think tank. I'm here with John Splinter. And John, why don't we start by you introducing yourself, and then we'll talk about the topic we're going to get into.
Sure. My name is John Splinter. I've been in ministry all my life. Right out of college, I went into seminary, and then I've been in ministry ever since. Well, a short break in business, but basically in ministry all my life. Along the way, I've picked up three postgraduate degrees. I've got a master's in Christian education, a master's in counseling psychology, and a PhD in family therapy. I have pastored in small, medium, and large churches. I started one church. Been on several short-term mission trips, but I've never been long-term on the mission field, and that's a significant thing since I work with what's called member health. Member health is, in this role, I am a pastor and a psychologist and a resource person to probably a couple hundred people on the field, men, women, and children. And that's basically what I do. I will tell you more about what I do as we go through this whole presentation, but I'm called the Member Health Director of Member Health and Resources. That's my job with Act Beyond.
Great. And we're going to be talking about the member health model, the member health care model that we use here at Act Beyond. So why don't you give us some background on that model and what it is?
Okay. Before I talk about the member health model, let me talk about the member care model, because that is where most mission sending organizations have been and where most still are today, as far as I know. The member care model basically involved either a psychologist or a pastor or somebody that kind of understands missionaries and missions, being available to travel to the field to maybe pay an annual drop-in visit with missionaries, see how their families are doing, and if there are problems, to hop on an airplane and fly to that person's residence and spend a week with them and so forth. This person is positioned to be an expert. That is, they're to be a fixer. They're either to be a professionally trained psychologist or a pastor that can help couples if they're having marital problems, or help them if they're having parenting problems, or help them if they're having communication or relationship problems with their supervisors or whatever. They're positioned to be the fixer. Before Act Beyond was Act Beyond, we called ourselves Mission to Unreached People. And as Mission to Unreached People, or as MUP, we did the member care model. Our CEO tells me that when we were at our very best using the member care model, we were able to reach only about 60% of our people. And the other 40% was kind of like, too bad, so sad. We just are not able to get professionals to you. And so we hope you fare well, and we'll pray for you, but that's about all we do. It's a very labor-intensive approach, and I am told that there was a fairly high burnout rate of member care people because they dealt all the time with pathology, all the time with things that are not going well or right. They very often were not really welcomed into the homes of missionaries, because if you're a missionary and you've got real bad marital problems going on, it's already intense enough in your home without having a professional psychologist come in and sit with you and have meals with you, and you try to get the kids out of the house so that you can have conversations, and then one of you is crying or the other one's really mad or whatever, and the kids come back in the house and it was crazy. So we were looking for a different model, a model that was different than the emphasis on fixing things that got broken, because that's kind of the member care model. It's kind of fixing things that got broken. And as I said, in some situations, there was a high burnout rate of these personnel, primarily due to the travel demands, but also due to the fact that they were always focusing on things that weren't going well and got broken. So before I arrived on the scene, there was a high-level conversation between our president and one of our vice presidents, maybe two, and a psychologist from California, a guy named Brent Lindquist. And somewhere along the way, either through Brent or because of their reading or experimenting or thinking or whatever, praying, a new model was designed. It's called the member health model, not the member care model, but the member health model. And the member health model involved so many changes in the member care model that we pretty much put the member care model to bed and said, okay, we're done with that. We're moving on. It's a brand new paradigm. And so for the rest of what I'll share with you today, I will talk about the member health model. The member health model in our organization begins by making several fundamental changes, one of which is a change in the missionary's identity from being a Lone Ranger kind of person out on the mission field and winning people to Christ and so forth, to being a team player. I don't know how all mission organizations are structured, but MUP, now Act Beyond, used to be kind of a conglomeration of Lone Rangers, people that were out on the field. They may have been within 200-300 miles of another missionary, but maybe not. And they were out kind of doing their own thing. They weren't planting churches. That's another change that we made that we won't even get into today. But the identity was as of a Lone Ranger, and we are changing that identity now. And the identity now is you are part of a team, and we want you to get to know your teammates, and we expect you to function in a team capacity, and we expect you to be integrated with people that are on your team. And if you're too far removed geographically from your other Act Beyond missionaries that are in the same country as you are, or the same state or whatever, then we expect you to create connections, and we'll get more into this a little bit later. We expect you to make connections in a manner that you have got a team of people, preferably Christian people, that are around you. So that's a fundamental change. Another change, and an essential and fundamental change between the member care model and the member health model. Member care model was reactive. There was an emphasis on preventative medicine, whereas with the member health model, did I say that wrong? The member care model was based on reaction and fixing things that got broke. The member health model, the emphasis is on preventative medicine. Trying to stay ahead of the game, trying to give resources, training, support, encouragement, all kinds of stuff to keep people's carts from falling off into the ditch. The emphasis on restoration, there is an emphasis within member health on restoration after the cart goes in the ditch, but we're trying to avoid that at all, as much as we can. We're putting every bit of our strength into keeping the cart from going in the ditch. Then if a cart goes in the ditch, as they do from time to time, right, there's a very strong emphasis now on restoration and a continued sense of God's calling after a crash. I've been a pastor all my life, and in churches, to this day, I would say probably in 95% of churches in America, if a pastor has a very serious crash, caught stealing money or caught in an affair or using prostitutes or hooked on pornography or hooked on gambling, or his career is done. And there's some reasons for that, and that's kind of been the history of the church over the years. In Act Beyond, we are really working at trying to understand how the person got there, helping them get the restorative work that is necessary for them to be able to get back into ministry, hopefully with us, but to continue a sense of God's calling, because we don't believe that God calls a person and then if they sin once or twice in some small ways or big ways, they're out, their calling is gone. My experience as a pastor is that after people crash and burn, after Satan has his way with a person, and then Jesus is able to restore and heal that person is twice as strong and twice as effective as they ever were before, and they're especially strong and effective in the very area that Satan had his way with them. So there, in member health, there's a real strong emphasis on restoration and continuing sense of God's calling after crashes. Now, to understand the member health model, all you have to do is draw 4 circles, one inside the other, and we'll start with the inside circle, and then I'm going to call it circle 2, circle 3, and circle 4, and you can either draw it on a piece of paper, or Justin will put something on the screen that represents what we're talking about. But we're going to start off in the middle with the smallest circle. This circle, the first circle, is the missionary themselves. And the most missionaries that have gone to the field have had some element of training. There's different levels of training that different missionaries have. Some mission sending organizations put people out on the field with a wing and a prayer, and they say, "Hey, we're behind you. We're praying for you. Go have fun." Other missions organizations say, no, we're going to train you in a little bit more serious way. At Act Beyond, we are taking training as seriously as we know how to take training. And we are involving high-level personnel in the organization in the training module. We will spend at least a couple of weeks with focused training at our headquarters in Dallas, and then we will give people additional training exercises that they must accomplish before we will send them onto the field. One of which piece would be what's called the Perspectives course. It's a 15 or 16-week course, very intensive training course about missions work, missions history, missions philosophy, and so forth. We also require that people will go to another mission training organization that will spend another couple of weeks working with them on a whole raft of topics and information, giving them tools. So we are working hard at training. We're also in that first circle. The first circle, you could put an M in it if you want to write it in, say for missionary. We are equipping that person, not only training them, but we're giving them tools for them to use on the field. And then a third thing that we're doing in that circle is that we are teaching about attachment. One of the pre-field screening pieces that we use in Act Beyond is to gain some sense of each candidate's level of attachment, because there's research. We know there's research now on missionaries that have crises on the field, and you're much more likely to have a crisis, a personal crisis of some kind or another, when you're on the mission field, whether it's a burglary or robbery or getting beaten or other. I mean, I don't have to articulate stuff. There's a lot of safety in being just in the United States and staying in suburbia. We know though that when people are on the field, when a missionary is on the field and they encounter a crisis, if they have people that know them, that love them, that are wrapped tightly around them, they're much more prone to recovering and remaining on the mission field. Whereas if they're the Lone Ranger out there and they have a crisis, they're much more likely to crashing and burning and saying, I guess I wasn't called for this and I'm leaving, I'm going back home. So we are teaching people at the beginning of their training now that you must find attachment on the field. You must create it and you must maintain it. And so within the little first circle with the missionary, we're training them, we're equipping them, and we're teaching them the critical nature of being attached. Now that's the first circle.
And those attachments are not to things, they're to relationships with other people. That's the kind of attachment we're talking about here.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had lunch today with a psychologist that I'm recruiting to be a fourth circle person, and she has a PhD. She has the same degree that I have, same institution. And we were talking about a situation that she had encountered in a church that she attended here in St. Louis. And she said there was a guy in the church that just couldn't get his life together. He was a misfit. Life was always upside down for him. He couldn't hold a job. And one day the pastor of the church called the guy in and said, you don't fit here. Have you ever thought about being a missionary? And that's, she told me that my jaw dropped, because being a missionary is the hardest calling there is in the kingdom of God. There is nothing harder in the kingdom of God other than being crucified, I suppose. But being a missionary is just really hard, especially the first 2 years. And you just don't send people out in the field that are social misfits or that don't have strong attachment or that don't, by attachment, you're right, Justin, that you don't send people out there that grew up isolated and have lived isolated all their life. So that's the first circle. That's what we're doing in the first circle. Now the second circle, that circle, and Justin, if you could put about 3 or 4.
You can see this on your screen, right, John?
I can see it.
Okay, great.
4 dots of some kind around that circle, 4 asterisks or whatever you can put around it to represent 4 people in that circle. Now, these may be other Act Beyond missionaries that are on a person's team, or they may be other expats that are working in the same area that, they may be with some corporation, or they may be other missionaries, like I said, or who cares? We don't really care. Hopefully they'll be Christians, but if there's no other Christians in the area, at least these are 4 people that you are willing as a missionary to become close to in a friendship manner. Encourage them to be praying for you, and you pray for them. And these are people that you will share your life with. These are people that you, if you're really depressed because you're having struggles learning language, you've got somebody that you can say, hey, pray for me. I'm just dying in a pile here. I'm struggling with this language. I just can't get it. Or if you're lonely and you haven't had any social connections for a week or two or three, you've got these people that you can go to their home and just drop in on them and say, let's take a walk together, or let's play some cards together, or let's do a Bible study together, whatever. I need personal interaction, and I need to share my life with people. And we are saying to our missionaries, you got to do this now. You can't be a lone ranger anymore. So it's your responsibility to find 3 or 4 people and begin opening up your life to them. And these are accountability partners too, because on the mission field, people face temptations on some parts of the mission field that we don't face in the Western world, not like they do on the field. On the Western world, if you got a computer, you got pornography, that's a lure, and it's constantly trying to trip us up and trying to get us enslaved. Well, in Southeast Asia, in some places in Southeast Asia, prostitution is pretty much wide open, and they do it through the massage industry. And if a person's having a hard day or a hard month, and they're saying, oh, I'm really dying, and I got to do something relaxing, I'm going to go get a massage. Well, in various places in Southeast Asia, you go for a massage, and they try to get you into a sexual act, and they work hard at it, to the point that we tell our missionaries, if you're in some parts of Southeast Asia, you want to go for a massage, take your spouse along and have your spouse in the room with you, so that they won't try to seduce you and start, really pushing sex on you. So a person that is weak on attachment is very susceptible to some of Satan's lures that he throws out there for helping people feel better about themselves. And I jokingly said to the psychologist that I was eating with at lunch today, I said, part of what we're looking for is some psychologists that can be involved with our people, that can help build good, strong relational systems within the missionaries' social world and their families, so that they don't have to go to a massage person in order to feel good about themselves. And it was kind of a joke, but we're teaching attachment and accountability. So these 3 or 4 people around that circle are not just friends that you're there with and you can talk to and share things with, but these are people that you're saying, please pray for me. I'm struggling with anger right now. Or please pray for me. I'm struggling with loneliness right now. Or please pray for me. I'm a single person and Satan is really tempting me through this whole massage thing, or whatever it is, so that we've got people around us. Again, going back to the research that was done, the research was done by a professor, an adjunct professor at Duke University. She's a psychiatrist, and she was on the mission field herself and did research on missionaries that crash and burn. And she found that missionaries' resilience is so much stronger when they've got a group of people that they are tight with on the field, that are like family to them there. Okay, so that's the second circle.
And this second circle, what we're saying is these people ought to be physically present in the same town. Like a Skype call is not what's counting here.
A Skype call, you can't reach out and get a hug through a Skype call. And Skype is a double-edged sword. It can be a really good way of keeping a person in touch with their friends in the United States or with their family in the United States. And it's wonderful to sit, as close as I'm sitting to my computer right now, which is about 18 inches away or 2 feet away, and be 2 feet away from your loved ones and so forth. But the problem with Skype and the problem with that kind of connection is that pretty soon you start saying in your mind, why the heck am I sitting over here in Indonesia or in China or in wherever I am when everybody that I love is back in the United States, for goodness sakes? Whereas if you have the relationships on the field there with you, these are people that are likely struggling with the language, or if they are domestic people, if they live there, they're people that you can get a hug from now and then, or that you can take a walk with now and then, and they can put their arm around you if you're sad or struggling or whatever. So they're local people. So yeah, it's a good point, Justin.
Okay. So number 3 here.
Okay, third circle. This circle has 2 dots in it, maybe 1 dot, but probably 2. In our system, we have, let me change it to a military parlance for just a minute so that you can understand what I'm talking about. Let's say that on the mission field, we have got corporals, sergeants, majors, and colonels. The people in this third circle would be the major or colonel kind of person. They are a supervisor person. They are what we call the affinity block director or the cluster facilitator. You don't need to understand what those terms mean, what they entail, but for the purpose of this diagram, they are supervisory. And in times past, in the old member care model, these people were kind of nuts and bolts people. They were, how many people have you shared Christ with this week, and have you started any churches, or what have you done to make inroads into this culture, and talking missionary talk all the time. And what we're doing now, and part of my job is with these people, is to say there's a pastoral function that we want you to take, and we want you to not only talk missionary talk and do your supervisory thing and represent the company and all the other things that go with supervision, but we want you to be pastoral, and we want you to say, how's your family doing, and how's your marriage doing, and how are you doing physically? Are you working out? Are you taking care of yourself? And how are you doing spiritually? And how are you feeling about your call to missions right now? And do you have a couple of people in that second circle now that you're beginning to really open up to, more than you would open up to me, but people that you really are getting attached to, and you can share with. And how's your fundraising going? And how are your spirits? I mean, what's going on in your life? Talk to me about the softer things. And it's a little bit more pastoral. Now, I wrote a piece that I sent out to our affinity block directors and our cluster facilitators, because in that role, you're wearing two different hats. It's called having a dual relationship. In the field of psychology, you're not supposed to have a dual relationship with people. A dual relationship would be like doing therapy with your brother, or with your wife. You're not supposed to do that. It's the same thing with doctors. They say don't treat your own family, because you just get too emotionally embroiled and you make mistakes. But in this third circle, I have tried to train our people and say, you have to wear two hats. You have to have a dual relationship. You have to be the corporate person that does talk missionary talk and does talk about supervisory kinds of things. But we also expect you to be caring for these people as a pastor, or as a hen would care for her chicks, and keep your arms around them in some way or another. Now you can begin to see that missionary in the middle there, that M circle, the first circle, has already got 3 or 4 people right around them, and now that we've added 1 or 2 more around them, so we're trying to break that sense of I'm on the field alone and nobody is out here with me, and nobody knows what I'm doing, and nobody seems to care except for my supervisor who calls, and I don't like them either, that kind of a thing. So now in the fourth circle, this is the perhaps the most creative, innovative part of the member health model, and there's a tremendous amount of power in each of these circles, and this is equally true in the fourth circle. What the fourth circle is about is creating professional resources in terms of personnel, mainly, not only personnel, but mainly in terms of personnel for our field staff. Now, I say personnel, and I'm going to contradict that in just a little bit, but let's talk about professional personnel, what that would mean. For the most part, it means my finding Christian therapists, hopefully therapists that have got some cross-cultural experiences. Maybe they were missionaries, maybe they grew up in another culture, or maybe they've just spent a lot of time working with different subcultures that are non-Anglo or whatever. But these are people that are at the very least licensed therapists with master's degrees, preferably PhDs, and I've got a mixture of both. And with these people, I will attach one therapist, one Christian therapist, to one affinity block of people. Now, an affinity block can be anywhere from 2 or 3 people that might be working in Japan to, I won't say what country, but we may have 10 or 15 people working in one country. And if we have more than 6 or 7 people in an affinity block, I'll probably put 2 psychologists, one male, one female, working with that affinity block. But the psychologists out in that 4th circle work with one affinity block. And the purpose of the psychologist is to do preventative medicine, to take preventative care. You can call it prophylactic care, although the word prophylactic in our culture very often is tied to the whole sexual thing. But in the kind of the medical world, a prophylactic is something that helps prevent sickness or help prevent a problem. So this psychologist, their role is to make contact a couple of times a year, to just talk for an hour or so with each couple or each single person, and just kind of check in. How you doing? And how's your career going? And how's your spiritual life? And how's your physical life? And how you doing psychologically out there? Are you thriving or are you dying? Have you been able to build that circle of friends around the second circle? And are you leaning too much on your stateside relationships to kind of keep your head away from where you are on the field? And are you having any conflicts? Because I can teach you some conflict resolution things if you are. Or I've got a whole career full of things that I can help you with. So let's get to know each other, and then maybe there's some ways that I can be of real support and encouragement and uplifting for you. And that's what I'm here to do as a psychologist. So right now, I guess I've got 5 or 6 different psychologists that are involved with our affinity blocks. And one of my professional goals is to have at least one psychologist involved with each affinity block. And that psychologist is making contact with each missionary at least a couple of times a year for the purpose of what I've just gone through. Now, I said that 4th circle is mainly about supportive professional personnel, but it's also about non-personnel resources. Remember, my title is Director of Member Health and Resources, and so I've created a website for missionaries, just for our missionaries, and I stick resources in there as I come across them, things from the web, or books that I've read or heard about, or programs that people can plug into, or homeschooling resources. I've got, I don't know how many hundreds of resources are already in this thing that we call the warehouse. It's an internal website that our missionaries have access to at any time. They can just bring up the system and go to the warehouse and look up resources. If they've got kids and they're thinking about coming back stateside, missionary kids have a whole different world of issues to deal with when they come back to the States. Well, there are resources in there for missionary kids. There's resources for repatriation coming back to the States. This is what you're going to deal with. Here's some resources to deal with that. When missionaries come back on furlough, a lot of them don't have cars. Where are you going to get a car? Well, there's resources about where do you get a car. There's all kinds of resources in this website in the warehouse. Then I'm creating more. I don't know how to define them. I don't know what term I would use. I've got a couple of people that were on the field that write about every other week or every 3rd week, they write a piece on conflict resolution. Mm-hmm. Conflict between missionaries and their team, missionaries and their supervisors, missionaries and anybody in general, is one of the primary reasons that people leave the field. They have conflict going on. They don't know how to resolve it. And so we have a missionary couple that has done some rather extensive studying in the area of conflict resolution, has gotten trained by a particular program that's available out there in conflict resolution, and they write a conflict resolution piece that is posted every 2 to 3 weeks on our internal website. They're also available by Skype for if a missionary wants to call them and say, I've got a problem and I don't know what to do and I'm in a conflict. They can Skype this couple and they'll give them really good input because they've been on the field themselves. They know the issues are. They know the cross-cultural issues and so forth. And we're going to have them coming to our worldwide conference coming up in a few months, and they're going to be putting on a seminar for doing some training in interpersonal conflict and relationships and so forth. And then there's another approach that we build that is trying to just provide a little bit of spiritual support for missionaries. Last year, we had an emphasis of focusing on Christ's teaching of how we are supposed to love one another or serve one another or whatever for one another. And there are like 70 different one another's in Scripture, in the New Testament primarily. And so last year, we had one missionary per week write a little meditation about some verse that said something we're supposed to do with or for one another, how to love and care for one another. This year, the focus is on prayer. And so this year, each week, we're having a missionary or one of our staff write a little meditation about something having to do with the issue of prayer. We're really trying to build our whole organization around prayer, around intensive prayer. And so this is just one more little tidbit of resourcing that we're trying to provide support and encouragement for our people that are on the field. And so you begin to see, you look at that circle, the middle circle, the missionary circle, and you've got layers of personnel around that person, and you've got layers of other kinds of resources around that person, and you've got several different kinds of professionals that can be called on at any given time, whether they want to talk to a former missionary about conflict, or if they want to talk to a pastor, they can talk with me. I'm a pastor. I've got other pastors that we can refer people to if they need a pastor to work some things through, or if they need a psychologist. So now this missionary, at least in our dreams, our hopes, is well supported, well trained, well maintained, and our hope is that this will free the person to be that much more productive and that much less likely to say, I can't do this missionary thing anymore. I'm too lonely, or I'm too conflicted, or I'm too whatever. I got to go back home. Now, granted, people are still going to run into bumps on the field. It happens. Missionary, as I said, I think I said earlier, I think I did. I think it's the hardest calling there is in Christendom. I've been a pastor, and being a pastor can be a very brutal thing on people. And most pastors don't usually make it more than about 3 or 4 years. I think the average pastor lasts about 2 to 3 years. Maybe in some denominations it might be a little bit longer, but there's a high washout rate for pastors. Well, there's a high washout rate for missionaries too, because it is just so hard. But that's what the member health model is about, and that's what we're trying to accomplish.
So let's walk through this. And the nice thing about this model, of course, is that it scales. But let's walk through a couple of scenarios of how this particular model would help a missionary on the field. So let's start with a very basic model. New missionary is coming on the field. He's been there maybe 6-9 months, and those first initial stages of culture shock are coming in. They're hitting home. I remember my daughter someday will probably kill me for relating this story, but I remember she was like, I don't know, 2 at the time, and there was one night when we were at the night market, and I asked her something about chicken rice, and she just broke down and started crying, and she said she didn't want chicken rice again. And I said, what do you want? And I said, she wanted French fries. And so, we went and got her French fries. But that initial stage of culture shock was hitting, How does this model help with something basic like that everybody's going to encounter? What would be walk through the stages with that?
Okay, so a missionary with their child is encountering culture shock together as a parent and child, and if you haven't been on the mission field, it's kind of like you almost just have to believe that culture shock is a real killer. I mean, it's really, really hard, and it's going to hit you at some point, and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be light. In this model, the missionary would have been trained to know that culture shock is coming their way, and that the first 2 years are going to be just bloody hard. They're going to be really, really hard. And they may have amassed resources back during their training time to prepare themselves for culture shock when it hits. We may have had them write down, here's what I think I'm going to try to do to take care of my mental health and my marriage and my parenting when culture shock begins to hit. Then in the second circle, they will have some friends around them, some people that they may be locals that might say, we don't have French fries in this culture, but I'll get you some yams and you can maybe fry them, to help with that kind of thing, so that the missionary isn't facing this alone with their spouse or their child alone. Third circle, they'll have the supervisor there that they know they can call on because their kid wants French fries, and the supervisor is now not just saying, well, you should be out trying to win people to Jesus, not thinking about French fries, but is going to say, yeah, we face the same thing, and here's how we handle something like that. And then in a worst case scenario, to be able to say to somebody stateside, help, I don't know what to do, and I'm not a cook, I don't know how to, and I say, fine, let me get my wife on Skype for you, and she'll teach you how to do French fries, so that there's layers of support around it. And then there may be other ways of getting other missionaries involved. Skype is a tremendous tool these days. Google Plus, VC, whatever. The electronic age it's both a curse, but it's a blessing to be able to link people in and say, let's get together with a couple of other people that might have faced the same kind of thing and see what kind of solutions they came up with. So it's interactive. We really are working at being interactive and connected so that people aren't facing that particular struggle or any struggle alone by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's do a different scenario. And this is one that's kind of that I would wonder about a little bit. You have the missionary in the center circle and first circle, and you've got this local team that's around him in the second circle. Now, what happens when the missionary, one of the things that we talk about a lot in this day and age is things like pornography and all of the stuff that relates to that in Southeast Asia or Southeast Asia or wherever. But there's other temptations as well.
Sure there are. Yeah.
What would you do? Software piracy or pirated DVDs or things like this. What do you do if your local team your local tier 2 people might think about things a little differently than say you would or your tier 3 people would?
They can think differently about stuff as much as they want, but we want to live within the laws of that country and of America, and we want to live well within the moral intent of the law as well, not just the letter of the law, but with the moral intent of the law. And so if they're doing some kind of piracy that they shouldn't be doing, we're probably not going to fire them, but we'll probably say this is something that you probably need to stop doing because the purpose here is to do everything to glorify Christ. Mm-hmm. And if we're doing anything in our lives or relationships that is not going to bring glory to Christ, then we need to have the character and moral fiber to say to ourselves, this probably is a behavior that I need to stop. And if the whole team, worst case scenario, is involved in piracy of software piracy,
scenario here.
Yeah, right. We may have to have a little team meeting and say, folks, this is probably something that we need to pray about and change our ways. And I'm just stretching this out as far as I can stretch it out. Right. If the team that is around you is not a team of Act Beyond people, but there are other expats that are doing bad stuff, we may have to think about getting some different friends.
So mostly what we're expecting is this tier 2 is going to be local, probably local people.
Yeah, local for sure. Yeah.
Maybe ideally they would be Beyonders, but if not with our agency, then perhaps other expatriates that are in a similar industry, like their other mission workers or what have you, that are going through the same things we are.
Yep.
And maybe a slightly more stretch of a situation is national believers or even national non-believers. That would be kind of not the ideal situation, but what we're looking for is people who share our vision, values, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and if they were national non-believers, it would limit some of the conversations because you wouldn't be able to say things like, I came over here to win people to Christ and to plant churches, and I haven't even planted one church and I've been here for 9 months already, or something like that.
Right.
Because then the national would say, so are you my friend because you're my friend, or are you my friend because I'm here for you to convert me?
Right.
And that would be a difficult deal. But yeah, again, the purpose, the goal is you figure out how you're going to build some people around you.
Who will ask
And
you the hard questions?
yep, who can ask you the hard questions and who are willing to pray for you and are willing to be there for you. Okay, here's an incident that this missionary from Duke, this psychiatrist, told me. I was at a conference and I met her a couple of years ago. She said there was this was in Africa someplace, and a missionary's husband. They were at a church on a Sunday afternoon, and the missionary's husband had to fly out to go someplace. And so he left, went to the airport, got on an airplane. She stayed at the church with some people. They're having a potluck and just fellowship and stuff. And then she and her daughter left to go someplace else, maybe an hour or two after her husband had left and probably flown out. And she was on a little motor scooter, and she got T-boned by a car, and her daughter was killed instantly. And the missionary's wife, the woman that was driving the motor scooter, was severely injured. Okay, now in this part of Africa, they didn't stop for accidents. Oh, another person's dying over there. Too bad about that. So she was in agony for a long time and had to kind of crawl and walk her way back to the church and say, "Help me." And then somebody went out and got the body of her daughter, and they wrapped around her and they got her to medical help, and they helped her walk through the grief process. And somebody called her husband, and somebody went back to her home and took care of their dog or whatever. I mean, they had a church fellowship that was around them and was able to step in and be the body of Christ for them in a crisis.
Right.
Whereas if she'd been out there and didn't have any kind of circle around her, she would have probably died that afternoon because she wouldn't have had a place to go for help. If she had, their closest relationship was 350 miles away in another town, someplace across Africa, they couldn't have done a thing about it.
Right.
So that's just one example of the critical nature of that second circle.
Right. Okay. So we'll do a different scenario from this. What happens in this particular model with people? I mean, I don't particularly envy you in some of the things trying to develop this, because I'm thinking about people who are in pioneer situations amongst unreached peoples they're pretty far out, and there aren't other people around them because that's where we work.
Yep.
So it's difficult sometimes to build this team. Are you seeing people being able to do it even in those particular instances?
We are new enough in this model that I haven't had a chance to really have that level of conversation with a whole lot of people. We've only been trying to implement this model for about 2.5 years, and I've been on staff with Act Beyond now for 2 years. And I have, I'll be going to my first worldwide conference this fall. So I intend to have that conversation with some of our senior field staffers and say, how's it working? And
Right.
Where are the strengths? Where are the weaknesses? But I think as we keep beating this drum, we being the leadership, the stateside leadership and the field senior leadership, keep beating this drum, it will eventually become part of our DNA. It's not part of our DNA yet. We've got some people that are on the field that are in remote situations that I doubt have taken one step to implement level 2 or circle 2, second circle relationships. But we're going to keep on talking about this. We're going to be keeping on giving examples of why it works and why it's important and so forth. And as we send new people out in the field, we're going to be saying to them, you may see some people that aren't doing this. Don't copy them. You need to do what you're being trained to do here. And this is the model that we're working with. So it's too early for me to give an answer to that. And I'm too green with the organization yet too.
Yeah. Well, me too. I'm not much older in the org than you are. So, okay. The last thing is that there are certain circumstances where you would need to have the option to go above. Like, okay, I mean, we haven't had this to my knowledge, but let's say you know that your immediate supervisor is, I don't know, stealing, embezzling funds or something like that.
Sure.
This model does not prevent somebody from taking care of those kinds of situations.
Right. No, it doesn't. The model is there to be supportive. The model is not there to be a hierarchical structure outside of which you dare not step. And we're doing something else that's, I think, pretty innovative. It hasn't been tested yet, but it will be, and we know it will be. It's just a matter of time. And that is, we're trying to get away from the idea of a rigid structure and away from the idea of absolute confidentiality. Now, let me explain that. If a married couple is having marital problems and they need to work with a therapist in order to deal with their issues, we will do everything in our power to help them get to therapy, and we will not ask the therapist to divulge anything. We will allow confidentiality, absolutely. Or if somebody's working with a financial advisor about their little retirement nest egg, that's their business. Or if they're talking with a lawyer about anything, that's their business. But if a brother on the field says to another brother, my marriage is in serious trouble and my wife is such a wench, I'm not even interested in being married to her anymore, and I don't care what this does to my ministry, but don't you dare tell anybody. We are teaching our people this is not an appropriate thing to keep to yourself.
Right.
And we are really going to be encouraging, and I'm about to publish a piece that's going to go out to all of our mission staff, all of our staff worldwide, that says we're really trying to build around wisdom and around trust and around encouragement and support and so forth. There's going to be times when somebody says, you need to keep this to yourself. And we're going to say, don't keep it to yourself, because there's times we need to wrap support and encouragement and prayer around a brother or sister, and it's much easier to save a marriage than it is to trash one and start over again. I worked in a pastoral role with a large church here in the United States, and one time I built a ministry for single adults. We had about between 2,000 and 3,000 people a year in the ministry, and I published a few books about divorce recovery, and I took both of my postgraduate psych degrees when I was there. And so I speak the language of singleness and divorce and all that kind of stuff. I speak that fluently. And one of the things you learn after a while is it is so much easier to resuscitate and rebuild and re-empower a marriage than it is to go through divorce and deal with all the child custody issues and all the financial issues and the ongoing antagonism and all that kind of stuff. Now, if we've got a couple on the field and they've got marital problems, we don't want somebody to keep that quiet. We want them to bring it to our attention, not so that we can spank them or threaten them or anything, but so that we can begin to say, okay, guys, you need some help, and we're going to help you get that help. And, Splinter's going to do everything he can to get you to the best people that he can figure, or you can if you got somebody that you really want to work with. But what we're not going to say to you is, okay, well, just struggle on until your marriage fails. We had one situation, and I don't think I'm divulging any confidentiality here. I think that this is pretty much a story that's well known within the organization. But years ago, and I don't know how many decades or whatever ago, but years ago, there was a situation in which a missionary, one of our missionaries, was burning out and needed some time away. And a therapist said, well, you should just leave and don't tell anybody where you're going, and just spend a couple of weeks by yourself and recharge. And so that's what the missionary did. Well, after a couple of days, somebody said, so where's Bill, or where's Jane, or whatever the name was? And everybody said, I don't know, I haven't seen her a couple of days. Well, 2 more days go by. Man, I went by the house and nobody was there. This is weird. Okay.
Did the secret police show up?
Yeah. They're about to call the U.S. consulate and report a kidnap.
Right.
And somebody says, I might know what's going on. We say, well, what's going on? Well, the therapist said you should take a couple of weeks away and don't tell anybody. Well, I'm a therapist, and from my perspective, that was an abuse of therapeutic power, if I could put it in those terms. Um, that was inappropriate. If a person's getting burned out, what we want to do is we want to have this system, this four-tiered circle system, that a person could say, hey, I'm dying over here, I'm getting burned out, and we can say, fine, let's give you a couple of weeks off to start off with, and then let's do some changes in your format so that we can make sure that you're not burning the candle at both ends. And let's make sure that you've got some people around you that are supporting you. And by the way, what's your work week like? Are you spending like 80 hours a week working, or do you have a social life? And let's help you recalibrate so that you can honor God's calling to the maximum ability. Whereas in times past, everything was kind of held confidential and don't tell anybody my stuff and all that kind of stuff. We're trying to say, no, that's not biblical. That's just not how it works. James 5:16 says, confess your sins to one another that you may be healed. And we want to create an environment in which somebody can say, okay, I'm really screwing up and I really need help, or else I'm going to crash and burn, without everybody saying, okay, well, start off with, you're fired, and then now we'll deal with your stuff. We want to get away from that, or get away from the thing where everything is held so secret and so confidential that the person crashes and burns, and everybody looks around each other and say, geez, what just happened? Why didn't we know about this? So that's another piece of the member health model.